I think this is the time to start the conversation again because when I was writing the paper for Metcalf in it was 2013, the Shared Platform and Charitable Ventures Organization paper, which I think is still on their website, there wasn't really very much out there to work from. There was tides, and that was about it. But now there's a lot of movement that's happening. I think because of COVID and the fact that nonprofit and arts organizations are going to need a kickstart. And so the Ontario Nonprofit Network has on their website some really invaluable papers on shared platforms and the public benefit nonprofit sector. So if you go on that website, not only do they have their case for them, they also have some tremendous guidelines on that. And there's also an academic paper now called "Platforms as Innovative Support for Small Nonprofit Organizations: The Toronto Case Study Evidence," the mouthful. It's by Dart, Akinbola, and Allen. And they make a strong case that there is enough evidence now that the things that the CRA, the accountability, public accountability, can happen under those shared platforms with a larger organization. So, it would be up to the larger arts organizations to be willing to bring new emerging projects under
Mhm.
their wing to develop their ability to sort of bring whatever their project or their ideas to a certain level and help them with governance and everything without them being encumbered by all those structures as a way of moving forward, especially for artists who aren't incorporated yet. That's I think it's a really helpful process. And then for the artists who actually have gone through the whole incorporation process, there's a wonderful, it's in two parts on Medium. It's Vanessa Le Bourdet. It's LE, capital Bourdais. She runs something called Dream Rider in Vancouver, and her piece is on evolutionary governance. As part one is principles and part two is practice. And that's really worth a read because she goes into it like she had a board of directors, didn't work. And that, but it apparently is working very well now. So, and one of the things that is really, I think, key there is that they talk about the minimum viable board. It was also in Vanessa's piece, she mentioned that someone from the CRA actually told her that the key things that are required is that you only need 3 board members. That's a legal requirement. You just have to draft very simple bylaws, that are appropriate for the little, the kind of structure that you want. You only need to meet once a year. All these other things
Okay.
grew up around, what a board does, are ridiculous. And you have to file all the financial report at the year end once a year to the CRA. So if that's all there is, then you can have other kinds of structures that allow you to really connect to the community, but just find community partners, right, who care about
Mhm.
it, and not that hierarchical, that old model of, that you're reporting up to the board. To me, I mean, I haven't been able to find anything that supports this, but I know it is happening around the world. It's just that we have specific rules here, but governance is a shared responsibility between the professional and the community board, right? And I also read a report a number of years ago because there is a group that's studying self governance. that said in the actual fact, self-governing mechanisms were more effective and more accountable to the community than traditional, board structures that we have. I really think that if we can sort of get down to a very simple and focused and principled, because that's the other thing. You have to have the principles in place first, because the principles and the values then govern, and that's how everybody then it's governed by those specifics of the core of why you exist and for whom. I'd like to see change. I think and I think it's important if there's going to be enough energy for the arts to reemerge in a strengthened way after this terrible period. They need to have the structure that's right
Mhm.
for their process and practice and vision, and not be, have something that's more corporate, which
Yeah.
I don't think will work.